Welcome to the You Are a Force podcast channel, your go-to space for real stories, fearless dreams, and unstoppable women rewriting the rules. And the force behind this podcast. Here is your host, Binoli Botadara.
Hi everyone, welcome to You Are a Force, the spotlight where we actually talk to women who refuse to play small, refuse to play old rules, but they dismantle them, they build something even better, not just for themselves, but everyone around them. I'm your host, Binoli Botadara, and today I have someone very, very special. She is in a league of her own, a powerhouse of finance, an unflinching campaigner, co-founder of True and Fair campaign, and also a co-founder and the SCM Direct and MoneyShe. She took British government to the court not just once but twice under the two Prime Minister, Theresa May and Boris Johnson, and safeguarding the democracy at the moment when the entire world was watching. She became one of the most consequential voices in the British constitutional history ever. But her story is even more than extraordinary because a life marked with unimaginable hardships, surviving abuse, violence, trauma, and a lot more. But you know what's more fascinating is the way she has come out of every hardship, and also she's currently facing breast cancer, but she is here smiling and glowing like ever before. So I cannot wait to dive into the world of Gina Miller. Gina, thank you so much for being on You Are a Force. It's absolutely honor to have you.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I like the phrase "dip into the world of Gina Miller." Who knows what we'll find?
I know, but I'm genuinely, I'm so excited because last night I was just, just going through again one more time questions, and I was like, oh my God, what a fascinating woman. And I was like, I'm in awe of you because so many times, when in like small things you complain about the weather, about food in this, food overcooked, undercooked, all sorts of silly things. And when you go through someone or when you meet someone like you just you just question so many things, that oh my God, why am I being so silly? So thank you for bringing that out of my life, and it was just wonderful to actually do some digging and stalking you, to be very honest. It was exciting, and I cannot wait to dive into your world. So let me start by asking you, let's hit the rewind, let's go back to the beginning. You moved from Guyana to the UK as a child. And so can you take us through how your childhood was? What did you actually want to become? Did you want to become an astronaut, or very outlandish dreams you had? And how did you basically develop some instincts or skills as a child, which actually became the bedrock of everything you've done so far?
I think what you've just said is absolutely foundational, actually. What you develop in your childhood do set the bedrocks, and it sets in stone almost. This not just your strength and your belief in yourself and your confidence, but also how you see the world. So the lens through which you see the world. And I sometimes get a little bit, not upset, but a little bit depressed about how parents see themselves today, because being a parent is such an incredible role.
Yeah.
The fact that you are forming the next generation, the next people who will build, reset, shape the world is so vitally important. Parenting is so undervalued. And I was just very fortunate to be born at the knees and growing up at the knees of parents who were very different,
Yeah.
but had very strong moral compasses and also very strong value systems. My father, I don't know if you know much about British Guiana, but, British Guiana is a place where when slavery was ended, um, William Gladstone's father, John Gladstone, came up with the whole idea of indentured labor. So that's the whole idea of using India, the Commonwealth and subcontinent, to actually replace bonded slaves, if you like, with indentured laborers on plantations across the world. So people were shipped from all parts of India to Portugal to Guyana to so many parts in the world, and so many more than were actually bounded in slavery. So there's a whole history of indentureship that I think, at some point is worth exploring and you need to
Yeah.
start talking about. And I recently funded or helped fund the first academic seat at Cambridge for a professor in
Wow.
indentureship. So,
Love
this is
that.
something that we will hopefully will start talking about more in curriculums. But, so my parents, my father's family, we think came somewhere, was from indentured slave ownership. So was my mother's. But
Mm.
then both their four parents sort of married. So, we're a very mixed, culturally, very mixed family. But those strong views of society, of education, of helping each other, of understanding that Buddha never talked, it's from the sole of your feet to the top of your head. Every part counts and everyone counts. All those values I grew up with. But my father was also somebody who, as a lawyer, had a very strong belief that law doesn't sit in black and white on pages in books. It's
Mm.
a living thing that brings justice and brings life to people. It gives them life. It was a living force. It wasn't something dry. And that sense of justice is something that he talked about in a way that really fired me and my siblings up, because I've got five and I'm the only one who didn't go into medicine, but they've all gone into the field and they all have been very vocational.
Mhm.
And I was the one who was going to follow my father and be a barrister. I was going to be the best female criminal barrister there ever was. I was going to take on the world. I was going to, do things and right wrongs and all those things growing up. And, and my mother was quite different. She was much more of an eco warrior before the term was, I think, even invented. So her view was, we look after nature, we look after our neighbors. Every string had a place and was wound up because you never know you need it. Every tin was washed out and kept. She said you never take anything for granted.
Love that.
And and she had this phrase. She used to say, "Would we really miss a little bit of rice if they're starving and we have a full plate?" And so she, they both had
Wow.
incredible, very different, but very powerful, very strong moral compasses. And but above everything else, it was where they aligned was on education, was
Mm.
the fact that we have to, through education, you don't just better yourself, but you better your understanding of the world and how you can help people. It is so much, it literally opens the mind and the heart. And
Absolutely.
so, that's something that was non-negotiable in our family, is that you had to work hard. You had to read everything you could, anything, and you never stopped learning. And
Mm.
those are the things that I think have always taken me through my life and professional and my campaigning life and my personal life. I have never stopped learning, and I don't take arguments for granted. I don't just see things in black and white. I don't think they're right, I'm wrong. I try and put myself in other people's shoes. That is something that I spent a lot of time doing.
Mm.
People think it's a sort of imposter syndrome. That's why you're doing so much work. We all have a bit of that, but
Mm.
that's not the reason I do that. I do it because I want to come from a place of knowledge. If I'm going into the battlefield, and I think campaigning and taking on causes is going into a battlefield, you
Yeah.
have to be armed with not just,
Yeah.
if you think about an army, you're not just taking one sort of weapon, you're taking a whole different sorts of arsenaries with you. And that's what I want to take with me when I go into the battle of campaigning or arguments or taking on status quos that are unjust. I need to be armed with as much knowledge and understanding and empathy as possible as I go forwards. And so what I learned from them, I think has always um, held me through everything, actually. And I think one of the things they gave me, my father, it gave me from very, very young age, is that he said, is the confidence to believe in myself, to that know, even if others knock me down, I have the strength to pick myself up. And I don't have to look elsewhere for that. It's already
Yeah.
in me. And
Yeah.
if you can give that to your children, if you can give them that sense of self-confidence, not arrogance, there is a big difference between
Mm.
confidence and arrogance. Um, I think then you can put up with anything. And it's the thing that has helped me put up with just about everything.
Love that. Love that. While he was saying, I was just trying to think about my parents, the way I was brought up. I grew up in an Indian family where it's a business family where girls don't technically study so much, and if they study, they pretty much study to be married, right? I mean, your objective
Yeah.
in life is to get married, have children, be the babysitter, whatever you want to do. And because people are having a lot of money around you, so you don't really need to work. But my mom very early on
Yeah.
told me, no matter who your father is, who the partner is, who the husband, whoever the man in your life is, you got to be financially independent. And my parents are
Oh,
taught that
absolutely.
way. And they did not, so I finished my MBA, then I started working. And when I moved to the UK to do my other master, second master's, everyone's like, why do you want to study now? And I'm like, why not? Like I was having amazing career and everything, but I thought that I was getting stagnated in my life. And I think that pretty much came from my parents because they always told me to keep learning and keep pushing the envelope and never settle for anything less than what you deserve. And also something very interesting which you said about parents, how they actually plant things into your head. And my mother has been always my cheerleader. Like even small little things I would do, she would be like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! But you can do this
Hmm.
and you can do that." And any co-curricular activities used to happen in the school. She's like, "You have to take part, even if you don't win. It doesn't matter." So therefore, I never had stage fear. I never looked into the mirror and thought that I lack something inside of me. I'm
That's
not
so
the
important.
perfect. And but that's how I grew up. So when people doubt themselves and they have like whatever the feelings about their faces or bodies or their mind and their choices, I'm like, why? I mean, I don't even understand because I think
But no,
it's
that's even
different.
more important than ever now, because when you've got young people growing up, because I mean, my children are so late teens, or 18, 20, the youngest too. And when now parents and what you're bringing your children up with, those principles and values and confidence is being challenged by external forces, because online, they're being
Social
told
media.
messages, the messages going to boys or young men is to hurt others, hurt property, hurt things. And for women, it's about hurting, the message is about hurting themselves in the form of how they look, their confidence, their abilities. These algorithms that are out there are actually challenging what we're doing. So it's more important than ever for parents to
I
be
agree.
alert to the fact that their job as a parent. And sometimes I know there are lots of different cultural differences. And when I come across, because I try and speak to as many and as diverse communities as I can. And when I'm sometimes more traditional, who'll say, well, what's the point of educating girls, because they'll become
They'll be
mothers, and
married.
I think there is nothing more precious than an educated mother, because then she becomes an educated caregiver, and she will, education is never lost on women, because there is nothing more special than an educated mother. And it is the sharing of knowledge and bringing the insight and being able to transplant that and to help in different ways. But education is never lost on anyone. So that's a pushback I tend to give. But no, this idea of what we're doing as families and the bonds we're trying to strengthen with our children are being threatened every single day by external forces. So yes, we have to be very alert to that.
Yeah, yeah, true that, true that. And I want to pick up on your why you became a lawyer. You've already answered that. And
Oh, no,
the
no, I didn't. So I didn't become a lawyer. So I wanted to. That
oh,
was my great big dream, is that I was going to be, and from the age of, I don't know, as far as I can remember, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, whatever, I was going to be a lawyer, and that was it. And and in my life was all, to me, planned out. I was going to have children. I was going to, everything was going to. But then life happens, and one of the things I've learned is that, if it is to, we have to be flexible in our thinking, and we have to, you know, you can't, what we plan is not always going to happen, some of it for whatever reason, but quite often for things that are unforeseen. And it's how you react to the failures and the traumas that really shapes you. It's not how you act to the successes, it's how you react to the failures. And so I was sent to England because my father was also a political activist. And at the time, when we eventually became independent in Guyana from Britain, we had a dictator who tried to pit the peoples against each other, so black against brown and against the indigenous people. Nobody was allowed to speak up against him. So my father saw it as he was instrumental in forming a multicolor party almost, to say that we are one people. And we should, and because of that, and a lot of other activists, there were death squads launched. And so anybody speaking up against the dictator were killed. And the very charismatic leader of the party was killed. There were people on the death list. And I was, my family, my elder brother and I were. So we were sent to the UK to be safe. And sent to a very small town in the southeast of England, to a very tiny little boarding school. And for me to that first trauma of, I'd never ever left home. I'd never even slept overnight, more than maybe one night with a school friend, but that was it. And to not be in my mum was also a botanist, so not to be in our beautiful garden or my home with my parents and with my siblings, just my elder brother and I, he down the road in one boarding school, me down the road in another one, was, I mean, I felt as though I was totally abandoned. I was only 10 coming up 11, and to feel that you have lost everything you hold dear, everything, was the first really big trauma. But I still felt, I knew why they were doing it, and I still wanted to prove to them that I could be strong. So I think I put away my emotions in a way. I packed them away, and I was going to be strong at that age. I decided I was going to be strong. And I would not, emotions were weak, which I later found out is not a good thing to do. But you survive as a child, and
Yeah,
you
I was about to
go
say
through that.
that you're juggling so many things as a child, so you don't really know how to process so many things, and in the hindsight, you think that way. But I think it must be okay to do that way rather than, being so hard on yourself and otherwise.
Yeah, so we, and I was going to be, so I studied and I managed to get into um, university. I mean, I missed them, and there were lots of traumas along the way, and lots of things that didn't work. And Britain in the mid 70s and early 80s was extremely racist and outwardly, and it was a hostile place. So it was tough being in Britain then, and but somehow managed to get through my A levels, and I got to university. But I never actually did my finals. So just a couple of weeks before my finals, I actually was attacked by a group of men for being too Western. Um, they thought I was too Western, and that what was I doing with a white boyfriend, or and dressing the way I was dressed. So I was quite brutally attacked. So I actually never did my finals. So I never went to law. So my dreams was completely and utterly shattered, and I couldn't bring myself to even contemplate. And the university wanted to hush it all up, and they said they would give me my first. And I said no. I mean, it took me years to recover from the trauma, so I never actually went back to the law at that stage. But the odd thing is, and I say to people who are studying law, that it's an incredible profession, or a degree to study, because even if you never practice, the disciplines and the skills you learn through those years of study are never leave you, and actually hold you in such strong stead to whatever field you're going to go into. The ability to build an argument, to analyze arguments, to construct a case, if you like, and to see both sides of an argument, and to be able to become an advocate is actually something all of us, I think, need in life. So it's never a wasted skills. It's never a wasted degree. So it's held me in good stead, even though I never practiced. I mean, I tried later on. I sort of thought about training as a magistrate, and lots of other times when I nearly turned back to the law. But I've used my legal training in my life, especially in my advocacy, and I've never dropped my interest in the law. So a lot of the work I've done in campaigning is actually through policy work that's led to legislation.
I was about to say that. I was like, you do not have a degree, but you have a lot of understanding, and you just like officially not a lawyer, but do have awareness of the law and how to change things?
Yes.
That itself is a big deal, right? Most lawyers don't even know what they're doing, honestly, most of the times. But well done on you. And that was my actual question, that you've profoundly been open about, talking about this traumatic experience you had, and which was also, you had to go through something as horrific as a rape, and you you still manage to talk about it. That itself is a big deal, because I was once sexually harassed on a flight while I was asleep, and I could not,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, I could not even fathom that it happened to me. I was frozen, and I did not even talk about it forever. Only handful of people know. Right now I'm saying this because you give me that courage. But my question to you is that the post-traumatic growth is what you have shown is something really amazing. So how did you actually convert that immense or personal pain into something which actually, made you stronger? Or what was the catalyst in terms of converting that pain into your own, profound personal growth?
I didn't deal with it at the time. I shut it away, and I remember my mother saying to me, which would hard, but she was a different generation, and she said you can't tell anybody, not even your father, because everyone will see you differently, and they'll blame you. They'll think you had something to do with it. So she was the only person who knew, apart from the university and a few other people, but who tried to then shut it down. They were more than happy to shut it down. So I packed it away and never visited it until years and years later. So I think that's the way I dealt with it at the time. And I also have this sense, which I've had through, and I think it's a mindset, and is that you have a choice. Do you let others break you because then they win? Or do you actually decide that you are going to pick yourself up and be strong and prove them wrong? And I've always thought, I'm not going to let them win. I'm going to prove them wrong, but also I'm going to prove myself right, that I'm better, I'm worth more. I'm worth more than them. And so that attitude, that mindset is so important. I remind myself, and I check in with myself a lot. I think there's so much noise in our lives. We forget to have that quiet moment where you sit and you reflect, because especially as women, we have, and you're going all the way back to nature, and the females in nature, is that our instincts, that feeling in the gut of our stomach, that second voice in our heads, are primal, but they're also there for security and safety. And so but we've learned, and we're educated, and we're socialized into not listening to it. And so I say to people, I try and check in with myself. It sounds a weird thing to say, but it also reminds me who I really am. And because it's so many forces trying to tell you to be somebody else and to conform, and how you should look, how you should behave, how you should sound. And so I really work hard on trying to be what I call not to be a secondary emotional responder. What I mean by that is our secondary emotions are, for example, when something bad happens, we don't want to be vulnerable. So what we do is we respond with anger rather than hurt. I allow myself to be hurt rather than to be angry, and then work through the hurt till I get to the other side. So I try to keep to those, I try not to respond, but to really focus on those primary feelings of sadness and fear, and not mask them with more trivial, if you like, but socially acceptable emotions of always being brave. People say, oh, you're really brave, or you're really fearless. I'm not. I'm fearful most of the time. And that fear is what drives me to act, because I'm fearful of a world where we don't care for each other. I'm fearful of a world where the disparities between rich and poor are so vast that there are millions of people living in poverty and in harm. I'm fearful of predators in our community. I'm fearful of what happens to our planet if we are not looking after it. I'm fearful when we think that worshipping money is better than worshipping our morals. So all these things keep me going.
Love that. Oh my God. I cannot even believe what you just said, but it's so true that to be fearful is so important. And a lot of things which you start, like you said, if you're not fearful, you would not even recognize there's some problem, and you will not even identify that there is some sort of imbalance which is happening. So no, I totally agree with that. But I want to pick up on something, Gina, which is while I was reading and while I was doing some research on you, and when I learned that you got married and you were in an abusive relationship, and then you had your daughter Lucienne, and you had to get out of the marriage to save yourself and save your daughter, and you literally lived in a car for like a couple of weeks, a couple of days. And I mean, that story literally feels, I was actually honestly reading a novel, because I'm like, oh my God, like, how does this woman uh, I mean, mothers do have the instinct to save their children. I get that. But still, taking that courage to get out of an abusive relationship is a big deal, because I know so many of my friends, they do not have that strength, and they are into the marriages where they're getting beaten up, they used to get beaten up, whatever. And so I want to ask you the question, that what was that pivotal moment, then you first time you really truly felt that this is unshakable lioness strength which just got ignited in you, and you're like, this is it, and I'm not doing this anymore, and I'm not taking this anymore.
No, so I say that you use the word lioness. I would say that my eldest daughter Lucienne, who's 37 now, and she was born with special needs, so her mental age is about 5 or 6. But she awoke the lioness in me. I think all mothers are protective, but she really was the one, and she has saved me so many times. And I think we in lots of ways, she might have an academic age of sort of 5 or 6, but her emotional EQ is off the charts, and her empathy and her ability to see the world, helps me every day. So she saves me in lots of ways. But I mean, it was so I actually was at the point where I my abusive husband, it was my second husband actually, and he was a very notable figure in the city. So I was working in the city, met him in the city, and he was very, very well known, very successful. And so I know lots of women, when you're in a relationship where everyone thinks that the person is, this great pillar of society, and in a mixed race culture as well, where he's white and I'm this brown woman who people think is just too mouthy, says she doesn't know her place, whatever it is, it's very difficult to be heard. But and that's why I do talk about it, because there are so many myths about women who suffer in abusive relationships. They're stupid, they're weak, that they choose to stay, that it's their fault in some way, that they must be hard to live with. There's all these myths that are out there, and that carry on. That's why I carry them on, because what I discovered from myself, my own experience, and others, but from my own experience I can talk about, is that the very things that drew him to me are the things he wanted to break and own. So he liked the fact that I was an attractive, smart, successful woman, but he was going to own and break all of that. Those were the things he saw as a challenge almost to break and own. And because I'm a strong person, and he couldn't break it through his mind games and through because the controlling, coercive side, it then I'm afraid became violent and physical. And at that point, I didn't know who I was. I mean, he broke me to the extent that I could not tell you who I was at that point. I was drowning, and to me, dying, I reached the point where dying seemed the best escape. Because I went to the police, nobody in the UK at that time. This is, now I could talk about it. This is now 25 years ago. And in Britain, as I said, a brown woman turning up in the police station at 2 o'clock in the morning, beaten up. I was ignored. I was left in my dressing gown in the hallway for hours on end, not even offered a blanket or a drink or nothing. It's just, we need to take you back home. And then people walking past just laughing at you, and they'd take me back home, and he'd say things like, oh yeah, she took too many pills and fell out of the bed, or fell down the stairs, or, she's an alcoholic, whatever it is. And they just laugh with him, and that would be the end of it. And so how do you nobody's listening, nobody's believing you. And every day you're covering up the marks and going out to work and trying to, you are so lost. You are completely broken. You don't know who you are. And so but the only thing that I kept thinking is, no, I have to stay alive for my daughter, because who's going to look after her? He would never, and I didn't want her to be put into an institution. My family, he had distanced me from my family, from my siblings, from my friends, because that's one of the things that people who are abusive do, is that they build barriers, they break all your connections. So they isolate you, and they tell you what to wear, what to look like, what to think, but they literally, the isolation is the first thing. They are very clever at breaking your ties with everyone, so you can't reach out for help. And so I did not know, and it was one incident that gave me the courage to leave, because I didn't know if it was my fault, because you start believing it is your fault, that you're a bad wife, you're a bad mother, all these sorts of things. When someone's telling you and playing games and manipulating you the whole time, you begin to believe what they're telling you.
Brainwash.
Especially after 2 or 3 years, the emotional abuse, you start believing it.
Yeah.
And one morning I woke up with quite a big gash in my back. And he said I'd fallen down the stairs. And Luciane, whose bedroom was opposite ours, sort of when he'd gone to work, came and saw me and said, "Mummy, why did his name, push you down the stairs?" And I said, "Did he?" And I said, "How do you know?" And she said, "Because it was so noisy, Mummy, I woke up and looked through the door." So when she said that, and I realized I wasn't going mad, that
And
I had to get out.
you didn't remember?
No, no, because I believed him. I believed him because he told me that's what had happened. So I mean, he was giving me huge doses of sleeping pills as well, so it was really hard to know what was real and what wasn't. Um, and so I knew I had a few. It was then or never. And so before he got back, so I put together a little suitcase for her, a little suitcase for me, got in my car and just drove. That's when we ended up, because I had no plan. I had no idea what I was going to do. So for 3 weeks or so, we just lived in my car in a car park, till I tried to figure out, and then reached out to my brother, to this person. I realized that one girlfriend who said, come, and she was there without questions, and she said, "I always suspected something, but he would never let me come to see you." And I started rebuilding my life with them. So she basically saved my life that day.
My God. I got goosebumps all over my body, and more power to Lucienne and more power to you, to manage to escape that jungle and that madness. But also I
Can
want
I tell you something? Can I tell you something? You made the phrase, it's almost like reading a book. It was quite interesting because when I was doing the court case against the government, and the Daily Mail and a lot of the other right-wing press in the UK were calling me a traitor and all sorts of an abuse. The abuse I was getting was phenomenal. They actually contacted my ex-husband, and said, "We don't believe anything Gina says. She's made it all up, that
why.
her life reads like a novel. We'd like to give you an interview." And they gave him a full page interview, bearing in mind where I'd come from and how I'd rebuilt my life, and that I was taking on the case against the government. And they gave him the space to do a whole page and brought up that whole trauma again, in which he again kept saying that I was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and that's why there was never any abuse, that I was the one who was abusing him. It was quite extraordinary that gave him all that space to do that. But so the trauma and doesn't go away completely at all. But you have to keep reliving it when people who so there was always a chance of me speaking out, that people would use it against me. But I speak out because I want women to know that there is a life beyond the pain and the suffering. You can rebuild. There is a better life afterwards, and that you do not have to live a broken
No.
life. You can actually live one that is true to yourself.
Absolutely. And the life is set of choices, right? Even if you've made one wrong choice, doesn't mean you have to stick with that choice.
It doesn't define you. It doesn't define you.
No, not at all. I have been dating different people, and while I was in India, I was dating men. Most of the times, they would make me feel so. So they would actually, in the joke or in passing, they would say that, "Oh, I'm so intimidated," but they used to feel so insecure, and just like what you're saying, they would not
Yeah.
make me wear what I want. They would be like, "Oh, you're not going out to drink with these people," older men, blah blah blah. And I used to change myself just to fit in the narrative because I'm like, no,
Yeah.
okay, he likes me docile. I'm like a complete extroverted, bubbly. I would go out, talk to strangers, but he would not like it. And then there are so many other men also thereafter I dated, and all of them would feel so insecure because here is a woman. My parents raised me to be independent. I don't really require their money. I have mind of my own. I would have, because my parents actually raised me to have an opinion on almost everything, which I have.
Good.
So yeah. And every dinner table I would have an opinion and then things like that. And then when you have a conversation with them, they feel so insecure. And just to turn me down, there is no other way. So they try and manipulate your mind in certain ways. And
Yes,
now
absolutely.
I have developed that sense of awareness that I see miles away. And I'm like, you know what? If there is a small, tiny red flag, I'm moving out. I do
But
not.
Binoli, that's a very important message for women is what I call the signs. Look out for the signs. Start with the why are you going out with your friends? What are you wearing? Where are you going? And unfortunately these days with mobiles, it's easier for them to track you. So
Oh,
don't allow them to track you and tell you, you don't give up on the things because then it starts very slowly, but oh, why don't you just give that a miss? Why are you not seeing me? Why are you not going out with me? I thought I was your special person, and all that sort of thing. No, no, no. You can. It's a partnership, which means that you are part with them and part of your life. It's not a whole ship.
life.
It's a partnership.
Absolutely, absolutely. And each person in your life has a space. So one person cannot replace your parents, your siblings, your friends, your colleagues. No,
No.
don't give so much of importance. And I've learned this literally looking at other people's life and introspecting into my life that I'm not going to make that one person center of my universe and he would dictate. And when you're dating and when you have that early, like love and infatuation, you like all that, but then it gets into your life and changes who you are. It's not worth it.
I
But
always say about it, think about it this way when you're dating that, how much time do you waste before you then break up and think this is not the right person? If you are you up front and say, actually, I want an equal relationship, I'm not looking for something. And if they say no, then you've actually saved
exactly,
yourself time. So
yeah,
and you will find the right
writing is
person
on
if
the
you are
wall.
completely
Yeah.
upfront.
Yeah, absolutely. Writing is on the wall. I totally agree with you. And therefore I people say that, oh, you've been single for so long, blah blah blah. But I'm like, no, I'm not
You're
going to
happy.
invest my energy into someone who doesn't deserve me, period. And so
Yeah.
I'm okay to be waiting on the table rather than being in wrong cupboard, So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
very, very sorted with that. But I really want to pick up on uh, when you also worked in the city and when you started this SCM
Mm.
Direct, and then you actually fast forward 2020, 2016, you reached at a famous turning point where you exactly, figured the Article 50. So for the listeners, what they don't even understand, if they do not know much about Article 50, if you can tell us what that was and what really triggered your deep subconscious that you had to start this conversation and take this particular topic very, very seriously.
So I've always used my advocacy. So I started my campaigning life, if you like, with my daughter because she's got, as I said, she's got special needs. And when she was born, at that point, schools in the UK were not required to provide provision for special needs children. So, and I felt only people with money could do that. And I felt that was wrong. I felt, all children and parents deserve to have that access. So I worked and helped, and I was successful in working on the in text that got into the 1996 UK and Education Act, which required all schools to provide special educational needs for children through
Okay.
something called a statement. So that was my first sort of big win through my daughter. So that's when I sort of cut my teeth on campaigning and using policy and law, understanding how Parliament and how legislation works through Parliament. But I've always been interested in, I've always read history. History is one of my hobbies, and the birth of democracies. And I've always been interested in, because of the way Guyana became independent and how, and the trauma we went through as a country. I was always interested in democracies and the birth of democracies and how democracies sustain. So that's something that's just been a pet sort of hobby of mine that I've always kept a bridge of. And in the UK, I did that act, and I'd been doing other bits of policy work. And when in the UK, we had a prime minister called Tony Blair, who then decided we were going to go into the Iraq war, which was when I was a young woman, and I felt this was wrong. I was like so many millions in the UK. We did not want to go to war. We didn't want to be part of that Iraq war. And I started and that's when I started reading around about how a prime minister can do that. And that's when I discovered this thing called the Henry VIII powers that was left over from 200 years ago from Henry VIII, and the way that a prime minister has to put everything through Parliament, bar a very few powers that they still have. And one of them is in times of war and international treaties. So there's some powers that they can do. So then roll forwards to the whole very toxic Brexit argument. I was on the Remain side, but I was very much, we remained at the top table, but we helped reform the EU for the challenges that are coming down the track. Because we could see since the financial crisis that there were economic, social, and defense issues around the world, that the tectonic plates had started to shift already. If you look, so I'm always very interested in what's going on in the world as well, and what's going on on our planet, and the way that stability of our worlds and the way the shifting of our worlds changes people's lives. And so roll forward to Brexit, and I thought, not only is it a terrible disaster, but how are you going to get this through Parliament? And I was very aware, so the mechanism for a member state to leave the EU, any member state can leave, is by triggering something called Article 50, which was actually written, weirdly, by British lawyers. And it says that any member state can leave the European Union along the lines of their constitutional requirements. So that gives that article a domestic element, because the constitutional requirements in the UK is that Parliament is the only person who can only Parliament can take away our rights. A prime minister cannot take away our rights.
Sure.
So Parliament had to debate us leaving the EU. And that's not what the first case, Mrs. May, who was then prime minister, she was going to trigger Article 50 and start the process of us leaving without Parliament.
Oh.
And that would have done two things. One is because leaving the EU, it meant our rights to work, live, travel, educate, everything would change overnight. So that's why they had to be debated in Parliament.
Sure.
Because it triggered that effect on all of our rights.
Yeah.
So that was why it was so important it went through Parliament. But there was also a much bigger problem that people have never quite understood, and which I was totally laser focused on. And that is, because we do not have a written constitution, we have a constitution that's made up of lots of things. One of the things that makes up our constitution is called precedent, which means that if something happens once, it can happen again. So if a UK Prime Minister had managed to bypass Parliament and change our rights, any other future Prime Minister could do the same.
Yeah.
So a future Prime Minister could decide, for example, to ban the use of all contraception in the UK. They could decide that every 16 to 18-year-olds for 2 years have to join national service. They could decide that all girls have to leave work for a period of time to have children. They could bring in any draconian, small, big rule without Parliament. So just think about that. That would then become part of our constitution, and people did not appreciate that. So my view was, I want to go to court to ask the courts, can a prime minister use their prerogative powers, these Henry VIII powers, in this way to change our rights? And ultimately, the Supreme Court in the country said, no, they can't. And I won in the Supreme Court. So then that triggering of Article 50 had to go before the court, the Parliament. Parliament voted it through, and the process started. So that was what the first case was about. But then the second case, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson was also going to bypass Parliament because he couldn't get the Brexit deal through Parliament. So what he was going to do was a different way of using his Henry VIII powers. So one of the powers the Prime Minister does have is to close down Parliament for our session and then open it for a new session. That's called a prorogation of Parliament. So you can do that. That's totally legal. All Prime Ministers do it. But they can't do it. They can't close down Parliament for a prolonged period of time if the reason is to push through a deal legislation rules that Parliament wouldn't approve of. Okay. And that's what Boris Johnson was trying to do. He was trying to close down Parliament to push through the Brexit deal he wanted to get through without Parliament voting on it. So again, I thought, well, this is illegal. You can't do that. And so they're sound difficult, but they're actually quite basic rules of parliamentary sovereignty, which India, every country in the world who copies our British Constitution and Parliament lives by. And so the case was very large in the UK, but it also had implications for every other jurisdiction that practices a British form of jurisprudence, separation of powers between the judiciary and the law and the parliaments, and the way parliamentary democracy and sovereignty works. So the implications, so both cases are still now, it's called Miller 1 and Miller 2, are actually used around the world, which is quite extraordinary. The one thing that I sometimes, I was giving a lecture at Cambridge University, and this first-year law student ran up to me, had printed out all the pages of the judgment and said, can you sign this for me? And I said, why do you want me to sign your judgment? And she said, because do you know you've done the biggest cases for 200 years? And I thought, I'd never really thought about it that way. So that was probably, forget about the newspapers and, the abuse and the good and the bad that came out of it. That young woman telling me that was probably the proudest moment of what I'd done.
Oh my God, I really got emotional because this is so amazing. I think this is how you've impacted people in this country, and so I cannot even begin to fathom. And it's also interesting that so many of us know these basics, but we do not have A, understanding our rights, and B, also to go and fight for it, and not just for our own good, but people just think that, till the time it doesn't hit the roof, it's not my problem, it's my neighbor's problem. So I think that also sort of goes and into people's head, and that's what I think, that sometimes we just become so normal with we just get so comfortable with not being
we get comfortable, and people, when people say to me, I'm not into politics, so I don't worry about politics. That's a big thing that a lot of people say, I'm disillusioned. And I say, do you understand that politics is about policies, and policies are about people? It's about how you live every moment of your life, from the minute you wake up, the clothes you wear, the food you're eating. They're all decided by policies, the quality of the food, where it comes from, the water you're drinking, what you're allowed to do, the hours you work, the protections. Every single element of every facet of your life is decided by politics and policies. Absolutely. Do you really not want to have a say in that? You trust them, do you? You're going to leave it up to them. I don't care what color they are, from which party, but you're going to leave it up to them to decide every single aspect of your life and not bother about it. You really, really want that choice.
Look what's happening in Afghanistan, for that matter, right? That country was not in this state what it used to be. And it was like a not progressive, but at least a democracy was there, women had rights. And look what's their state right now, and it like breaks my heart every time I read something. And it's all about policies, right? It's all about
It's all about it. And do you know what's so dangerous? I think we are at a really, I mean, I had to make a choice last year when I was it's quite interesting. My cancer journey has been an interesting one as well because um, I've been told I've lived my life at too faster pace. And the stress has probably been the thing that triggered. I have a genetic mutation that's quite rare, but it's what we all carry. We all are born with cancer, but the thing that triggers it, is it environmental, is it health, is it whatever? But stress is definitely one of the biggest factors. The way we live our very stressful lives, and so I've had to think: do I slow down? I am definitely one who's lived life at 110 miles an hour, but I have to learn a new normal, which is operating at 60 or 70 miles an hour. But I'm still going to operate at that level, and I've made the choice that I am, when I'm fully better next year, I am still going to be an activist and speak out, because I am really fearful of the 2030s, of where we're going to in the next decade, because I think it'll be such a pivotal, historic change for the world in terms of not just climate change, but peace, prosperity, what AI is doing, but also the rolling back of our rights and the threat to democracy, because we have fought, especially for us as women. We have come so far in the last 40, 50, 60, 80 years, but so many of the things that we are now taking for granted are being threatened.
yeah,
We're being told that our place is back in the kitchen, that we shouldn't be in DEI policies, should not exist anymore. The AIs have inherent gender biases in them. They're being, I call it coding for chaos. There are codes in there. The AI is definitely not gender neutral.
no,
There are dangers. There are so many red lights that are warning, that I think women at this time, our female voices, are needed more than ever to
yeah,
bring a different level of compassion and common sense and community to where we go next. And I think it's really, for example, there's a possibility we'll have the first female general of the UN Secretary General this time, and I think it's more important than ever that we do.
yeah,
And we have to stand up, and I think we have to be, women have to find their voice, not just find it, but collectively come together in a way to protect and to guard against what comes next, because the patriarchal structures are fighting to be re-erected, and the destruction that they will rain on us, I think, will be so destructive for the next generations to come, that we have a duty to protect those next generations.
I agree. I agree. And rising tide lift all boats, right? So you got to be there. And I was just thinking about the stress of doing things which actually bring a lot of stress into your life. But if you will not do it, I think you'll get more stress. So I think you should continue doing what you
Yeah,
do.
I think the stress, the more stress, it's not so much the stress of doing it, of the hard work. It's not that sort of stress. It's the stress of dealing with the abuse. Because when I brought those court cases for 2 years, we were looked after by the terrorist squad. I mean, the death threats I had, a viscount went to prison for trying to have me killed. I had people raising money. I was told, I suppose if I could tell you in a nutshell, the three things, Binoli, that I was told most frequent were that as a woman of color, it was not my place to speak up. Why was I doing this? I should be grateful that I was in Britain and being given the chance, and I should be quiet. The other thing, that I couldn't be bright enough. So it wasn't me. I had these very powerful men behind me telling me what to do. I was only the front, because I was easy to manipulate. I was like some sort of a puppet. And I think the third thing that was, it couldn't be my money. Who was funding me, who was behind me, and I've always thought the greatest privilege of my success and working hard is that it gives me the financial freedom to fund the things I truly believe in. And I have never asked for funding for anybody. Any of the campaigning we've ever done as a family, or me as an individual, we have funded independently, or I have funded because we believe in it. And that's just a great freedom to have. I mean, why have money if we can't do with it the best for the world? And so I've always seen that as a true freedom of success. And the true sign of success is giving you the freedom to fund, to fight for fairness and for others. And so, but the death threats and my children, being told that because they're mixed race, they were mongrels and should be put down, and they're being taken. I mean, it was 3 years of the most grotesque stress of knowing that either they or I would be killed. I mean, that's the stress. When I put my head above the parapet, it's the abuse and the death threats and the misogyny that is stressful. So that's the stress I'm talking about, of having to deal with that I've become much harder in dealing with it. But and I don't, I've always said, why would I want their voices on social media or where it is to trump mine? I don't, they don't touch me. They don't touch me because their voices are not going to trump mine.
And when I was reading about this abuse, and when you were getting like 20 to like 50 threats a day, and not just for you, but your family and everything, it was so shocking to me that there's one person who is trying to do something good to you, and there are these many people who are just doing this. And I genuinely was thinking that if you were a white man, maybe an investment banker in the city, I don't think you would have got that much of a backlash compared to what you had to go through, and as a family or as a woman. And I mean, I'm so sorry you had to do it. And I don't know how you used to wake up every single day and still be motivated to do what you do.
Oh,
And
there are many times I tried to give up. I mean, I there were mornings I'd wake up and think I can't go to court, especially when the court cases were on. And there was when we were in the Supreme Court in January, when the weather gets very dark early, and I'd come out of court and there'd be these, like, just it was like walking into a battlefield, because all I could see in the dark is all the publicity, all the media, all the cameras, all the flashlights going off, and then crowds of people just calling. And there was a person who even brought a noose and a hangman's neck, and just this screaming and shouting and hatred and "you die, you bitch," and all this sort of stuff that was going on. And every day having to walk out of that from the courtroom, I'd wake up in the morning and think, I can't do this, I can't go in, I can't go in. And my husband would hold me up and say, you'd never forgive yourself. And he was right. I would never forgive myself if I had given in. But it was really hard. And I'd come home and I'd have to be strong. And I'd come home and I'd just cry. I'd just hold the children and just cry for hours, because, I've always been the person, I've always been honest about my having the emotions and letting them out. I don't hold them out. I think holding your emotions in and trying to disguise them, or subdue them, is like having a rat inside of you, eating away, gnawing inside of you. So I prefer to let it out. And so I allow myself to be vulnerable and to be weak and to cry, because it then I can wipe my tears and be strong again. And so there are many times when I thought I'd give up. And when in the second court case, I'll just share this with you. I never envisaged ever, having gone through what we went through as a family in the first one, and the trauma on my children who were then young, of, I'd stopped going out with them because I thought, if anything happens to me, I don't want it to be with them.
yeah.
So, and so they couldn't understand that. So we changed every way of how we lived our lives completely. And I never ever wanted to do the second court case. And when I was told that basically because I brought the first case, I had something, what's called standing, because you have to have a reason to go, that I was probably one of the only people in the country who could bring the second case.
Really?
It sort of fell on me that I didn't realize I didn't have much. So I didn't have much choice. I could have said no, but it was so important, because basically the consequence of Boris Johnson doing that, if he had, basically what they were going to do, because they couldn't get the deal agreed in Parliament, is we were to leave with no deal. So we would become basically a pariah state. And that was just so unfathomable to me, that I thought we go through this. And the abuse was, by then, after 3 years, I know it sounds terrible, I'd sort of become used to it. And I'd found ways of dealing with it. And the children were a bit older, and we discussed it as a family. And they all said, Mum, you've got to do what you think is right. And I know you're doing it for us. And they've always known I'm doing it for them and their generations.
Yeah.
And we're not a mother just to our own children. We're mothers to the next generations, and too. So we have that responsibility. So and they were behind me.
And you won that 11 to 1, 11 to 0,
I know
right?
it was the most successful 11-0 court case. It was quite extraordinary sitting in that courtroom. But again, the way the press, twisted it and all of that abuse. I mean, the media have a lot to be answerable for, not just in the UK, but around the world, where we're seeing the rise of the right and fascism. Journalism has got to find its legs again, and it has got to
Yeah,
find its backbone because the responsibility that media journalists have is being sold out too easily.
very easily. And there's no free press almost everywhere now. I really feel that. And I want to pick up on something which is True and Fair campaign, which you started, where also it's something very interesting where you actually understood that there is some hidden fees which can actually shrink the pots of pension by almost 30% with women, because women retire, they take career breaks, they have like millions of other things. So it's about like 69,000 average for women compared to the men, which
Yeah.
is 200,000. So what was the cleverest move or the mindset hack you discovered along the way, which you noticed and which you think that, which can actually push the policymakers to for generations to make some sort of changes?
So I entered the city in 1996, and having worked in with asset managers and pension funds and wealth managers for all that time, the things that went wrong that led to the financial crisis were open secrets. Most of us knew what was going on, but nobody was willing to step up. So I'd already starting to say that we need much more transparency and accountability, in lots of areas, in not just fees and charges, but also in how products were being designed, on returns, where our money was being held. Not just these I'm talking about in the retail world, not in the professional world as much, but actually across both. But then after the financial crisis, I realized that actually not much was changed. And I felt that was wrong, because if people are prudent enough to put their money away and are saving, it is just wrong that they're being ripped off. Because basically, imagine, so you go into a store with your credit card to buy, say, a dress, and it says on the tag, so you pay £100 or $100, and then when you get your credit card statement, it says they've taken £300 or dollars out of your account. That's just robbery, isn't it? That's
Yes.
stealing your money. And
Yeah.
that's literally how the entire investment, wealth management, and pension industry was operating. They were only showing you about a third of the fees and charges.
Yeah.
Not only that, they were also only showing you the top 10 or so holdings. So they'd sell you a product saying, oh, it's a guaranteed this, or it's low risk. And actually it wasn't. So, it was, you need to know to make an informed decision to help people put away money, because I think we all have to be able to put away, not just for a rainy day, but for our dreams, to build for our futures and for our independence, about freedom of choice, and to have that security. Um, what we need to know is to be able to make informed decisions. How can you make an informed decision if you don't know what you're buying and if you don't know how much you're going to
Absolutely.
pay for it, which are
Absolutely.
basic fundamental principles? Then instead,
True.
the entire industry has operated with something called caveat emptor, which is buyer beware. It's up to you to do your homework, which is nonsense. You would sell a drug to somebody and go, by the way, buyer beware. You have to figure out if it's going to do you any harm. You're just going to send it out there. So
Yeah.
these to me were basic unfairnesses in an industry which I think is actually undersells itself as how important, because saving and investing and putting money away and looking after your money in a way that is that grows it, looks after the initial investment but grows it in a sensible, sustainable, ethical way, so you have it when you need it, is actually very, very important. It's something that I think, as in an industry, the investment and pension industry doesn't sell that social good that it has, and
Yeah.
that element of it, and it doesn't use the language it needs
True.
to. So that's what I thought. First of all, let's fix it, and then I can think about launching a company, which I then did for women, called MoneyShe last November, for to help educate and grow women and getting them to close that savings and gender investment gap. and that financial freedom gap that exists. But I tried to get the industry. Nobody in the industry was interested at all. They all thought it would bring down the city. It would. I mean, it's nonsense. Yes, it would slim their margins, probably put their margins in half. But it's the right thing to do. And I
Yeah.
kept saying to the city, but if you have more confidence, if you build more confidence and trust in people, more people will save and invest, and your profits will go up. So it's
Yeah.
actually a win-win for you, because the reasons our levels are so low in the UK, I mean, for example, we've got the lowest savings rates of the G7, is that nobody trusts the city, and if you build that trust, it's a win-win for everybody. But
Yeah.
they didn't get it. So because they wouldn't budge, we at the time we were in the EU. So I thought what I'd do is I'd go, and I then started talking to the EU and say, actually, this problem is across the whole European Union. It's not just the
Mm.
UK. And so Europe started listening. I got the European Union on side, and long story short, we got text into legislate a directive that passed in the EU too, actually,
Okay.
in 2014. One was called MiFID, which addressed asset management and wealth management, and the other
Mm-hmm.
one called PRIPS, which addressed transparency in pensions. So we changed the law. I changed the legislation across the whole of Europe to bring transparency of fees,
Love that.
um, which was extraordinary, and I'm very proud of that work. But can I just say what's happening in the UK since we left? I think
Mm.
as of next year, that transparency is going to start being rolled back, because they've never liked what we brought in. So they're going to be reducing, watering down that legislation in the UK, which is so, I mean, I feel so disappointed that that's going to happen, because the city has not learnt that
No.
actually honesty and transparency creates more trust. They haven't connected those dots enough.
Because people who are in the power, they have to answer the boards and, everything today. They do not care about 5 years, 10 years down the line what's going to happen.
No, no, and that's the thing with the problem with leadership at the moment is, their focus in. It's funny when people come into a role, and I see all these wonderful write-ups of when people, what are they going to do in their role? Most leaders have their eye on the exit from the minute they walk in the room. They're planning for their exit, and their whole strategy is how do they maximize their own career at a company so that they walk out the door with the biggest
Yeah.
bags of the biggest amount of money at it. And if leadership actually is about building a legacy and understanding that the word company, if you look at the etymology of the word, comes from company, which is breaking bread together, it's about us together,
Hmm.
then you would look at the way we operate very
Differently.
differently.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And like McKinsey actually predicts that, women would control more than 30 trillion of global wealth by 2030. And still, we're not even giving due credit to women, or women themselves are actually very scared of investing or for whatever mental blocks they have. And that's what you're trying to do with MoneyShe as well, with this incredible
Yeah.
platform and opportunity which you have created. And ultimately, because 60% of the wealth of women are having in the world, but they are not really comfortable, investing, or they think that they need to have a man in their life to actually do the investments for them, which is something really silly, which I think also.
No, believe me, financial freedom gives you the freedom to even when things you're in the most wonderful relationship and the most wonderful career, when it's over, you can start a charity, you can do all the things you want to do, you can help other people. The financial freedom, it's about choices. And that's the thing. It's not just about the bad things, about the good things as
Yeah,
well. And
yeah.
and investing, and there is this idea that it's a man's space, and the industry and men in it try to protect that, to say it's our space. We'll let you come in a little bit, but we won't let you anyway. Actually, everybody should be investing like a girl or invested like a woman, because we take longer term views. We tend to be not wanting to shoot your lights out. We're much more steady, ready returns is what we're looking for. We do things that we believe in. Actually, the mothering instinct, and I got told off in the early days by people in the city going, but men especially, oh, Gina, you have a very mama and papa view of the world, our investments or financial services.
Really?
And I go,
What does that
I
even mean?
know, no, I don't know what that means, but I say, you know what? I have a female, a feminine rather than a patriarchal view of how it's not about the pursuit of profit.
Good for you.
I have got it. It's about the pursuit of protection of people, planet, and profit. Let's go for a triple bottom line, not a single bottom line.
No, I love that because I totally understand, and because I work in the city, people have this layers and layers of, hidden implicit biases. But
Oh, yes.
but I also think at the same time, when we live in the world of AI, where from everything we buy at Tesco to invest and everything is sort of told to us, and till now the menus to tell us, and now the AI also is actually, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, adding fuel to fire. So I genuinely believe that because I work in investments and asset management, and I know that the moment I say this, people really think that I'm an alien come from some other planet. Oh my God, you're into that and you understand stocks and all that, all those things. There's no rocket science. So if you were to give three basic hacks to any woman who is listening today, what are the three basic things one can do to actually just get into their finances right?
You say the first thing to do is to sit down and make a list. I'm a great believer in lists. Look at your financial life. Where are you spending? What are you getting in? What are you spending? Where can you save a bit of money? What do you need to do? What do you know need to do? And find, if you can, amount of money that you can just set up something that's a regular saving, because once you set it up you can ignore it and leave it, and technology allows you to set up an investment account, things up, because I'll come on to that. So find that little bit of the money you can save, think about then setting it up and then doing regular, just you set it up as a regular thing, goes in there, and whatever the vehicle is, then it'll just look after itself, because there's this thing called the magic of compounding, which means it'll build and build and build and you don't have to think about it. So the second thing is, I'd say, is it's so think about what there are out there, what are the tax free wrappers you've got that you can put your money in. So there are things that are built for you that will allow you to build up wealth, and you build up your investments without actually paying tax on it. In the UK, we've got ISA wrappers, we've got pension wrappers. Think it's free money in a way.
Yeah.
So think about the wrappers, and then when what you're going to invest in, what you're going to put your money into, then the rules are, look at the fees and costs. Diversification, that we live in a very volatile world. Don't put all your money in one basket or all your eggs in one basket. Think about lots of different assets classes, lots of different regions, emerging markets. Try and make your basket of investments as diverse as possible. And I'd say, and don't fall into the trap of thinking that it's about the biggest brands or the biggest adverts or whatever you're seeing on these. Everything. Look, at the moment, the stock bubble, the tech bubble will burst at some points. It's that, don't run after the latest trends. Don't be a sheep and run after it. Think about looking and getting a bit of advice, or just trying to get as diverse products. There are these incredible products called ETFs, and think about looking at them, or looking at a platform that's low cost and will educate yourself, and it's not hard.
Yeah.
Look for places. I mean, that's what we've done at MoneyShe, is use plain language to explain to people. We just do lots of blogs and lots of information. So educate yourself. Education in all fields is key. Educate yourself, arm yourself with the knowledge, because at the end of the day, don't be a statistic. And unfortunately, the statistics are, women are living longer, lonelier, and with more complex health issues than ever before. And all of those things take money.
I can't agree more. I cannot agree more. And there are so many avenues and opportunities, and you don't have to get overwhelmed with all these jargons.
No.
And even if you don't understand, just go for a benchmark driven ETFs or funds. You don't really need to
Yeah.
have discover the new Nvidia for yourself. So you can just do that. And at the end of
No.
the day, sorry.
You know, I was saying that these products ETFs are amazing. I mean, and the active world is very skeptical about them, but they were worried about it. But at the end of the day, when you've got somebody like Warren Buffett, the great Warren Buffett, who in his letter to the trustees for his wife has said that when he passes, he wants them just to buy a FTSE 100 ETF or three ETFs and to put all his money in there for her. All the money, that's it. Three
Imagine.
ETFs. I mean, and that's Warren Buffett.
That's amazing. Yeah, I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that with us. And before I let you go, I just want to pick up on your breast cancer. And I'm really sorry you had to go through it, but you're fighting in a very aggressive cancer, which is actually there. And I really wish you that with your last chemo, everything is actually perfectly healthy and fine. But you've been brave about, talking about it. So how do you navigate your personal battle with, even with everything what you go through in your body, with the purpose, urgency, and legacy? What truly matters? How do you wake up and do it every single day?
So all my campaigning has always been, I don't tend to go out and look for causes. They're things that I believe in or have happened to me. So, I've done a lot of work around special needs because of my eldest daughter. I do a lot of work around domestic violence, especially economic abuse, because 85% of women who are in domestic violence or controlled relationship also suffer from economic abuse. And have no financial freedom or access to or ways to getting out. So, it's trying to get, that's another reason saying to women, well, even if you're in a wonderful relationship or you think you're going into one, have your money put aside that's yours just in case. So, I'm doing a lot of work around economic abuse. And one of the things I've discovered of going through my cancer journey is that obviously you've got all the physical and emotional trauma and challenges, but also there are the financial challenges because by the time I'm finished all my treatments and surgeries next year, sort of spring, summer, then it would have been 2 years. So imagine 2 years of not earning, not having,
Yeah.
and other bills go up. You need more heating, you need more care. A lot of people, if you have young children, need help with care. If you have elderly parents, because women now we're sandwich carers, we're caring for the children and the parents, and all those costs that go up. So you do need to put money aside. And I think that's so important. So I talk about, having, that's another reason, yet again, to have that financial a safety net is that you never know if you've got a diagnosis, what will happen, what the impact of that. And that's the stress you don't need on top of going through everything else to have a financial burden as well. But
Absolutely.
also I'm speaking up because it's the breast cancer I have, I'm talking because there are women all around the UK and all around the world all checking for lumps. And one of the things I want to say is you have to look for all the signs for breast cancer. It's not just the lumps. It's for any changes in your nipples. And when you're looking, it's not just for lump, it's any mass you discover, not just on your breasts, but under your arms and all the way up to your neck. So, I want to really say to women, be alert, be careful, check, make sure you're checking on a regular basis. Don't just check for lumps. That's only one sign. And the other one is when you get an appointment for a screening, go for it. We always put ourselves last, we always put things off. But, that 1 hour of that screening could make the difference and add another 10 years on your life. So don't put off, you are worth it. You are worth the time to go and get checked out, and put that time aside to do that.
Can't agree more. And I cannot even begin to tell you that, how impactful this conversation has been. It's gonna stay with me for so long. But before I
Oh,
let you go, I just want to ask some rapid fire questions. Whatever comes
that's
to
fine.
mind, you can just bring up, right? What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
From my grandmother, don't live in regret.
Love that. What's your all-time favorite book?
Ah, I have two. One is A Count of Monte Cristo, which sounds a really weird book uh to bring up it, Count of Monte Cristo. But I'm afraid I'm fascinated by a book that you would not have heard of. It's The Way We Live, which is written in 1835. So an old book.
Really? Okay. Okay. What's a go-to self-care everyday routine or ritual?
Music. I dance around the house a lot.
Amazing. If you could sit down with 16 years old Gina today, what is the one thing you would tell her?
Never stop believing in yourself.
Who is that one woman, past or present, who inspires you the most?
There isn't one woman. There are several women. If I had, there's people after ask this question. If you're in a train carriage, who would you want to be in the train carriage with? I'd want to be in the train carriage with Mother Teresa, Maya Angela, and also my grandmother.
Wow. What a unique blend. And I wish you could you could at least live the fantasy maybe in the dream one day. But the next question is, what does financial freedom truly mean to you?
Without money, there's no freedom.
Love that. If your life were to turn into a film or a book, what would be the title?
Well, my book, I actually wrote a book called Rise, and I suppose that would be it. Rise, because I think we all have the power in us when we fall to rise again.
When I talked to you and when I read about you, I thought Phoenix would be a right name to your book.
There you go. It's similar.
It's similar, absolutely. What's the best investment you have ever made?
I've got a I've got a fun one. Um, so the best investment I've ever made is actually in a little, it's a heart-shaped marble pebble I found on a beach.
Oh,
And I had it, and I you couldn't bring it back. You couldn't bring it back off the beach. So I actually paid quite a lot of money to have it specially cleaned by a scientist and brought back. And I carry it with me everywhere, and I
oh,
hold it everywhere. And there's something about it that gives me strength. So it's sort of got a healing power about it. So I carry that with me everywhere. The other best investment, I suppose, is I don't know. I don't think about investments in a monetary way. I think it's a time I put into my family and friends.
yes, absolutely priceless. You have rebuilt Gina yourself multiple times. What is that one part of Gina you would never rebuild because it must stay untouched?
I would never become truly strong. I want to be vulnerable.
Oh my God, that's so profound. If you could fund one underinvestment idea today in the UK, what would it be?
I would absolutely put money into a proper food and water strategy because we are an island. And I don't think we have any idea what's coming down the track.
What does success mean to you?
To live by the values and the principles and the morals I hold dear.
Wow. And last but not least, to all the women who are listening today, what is that one piece of advice you would give it to them?
When you knock on a door, stop saying sorry. Every woman I know, the first word that comes out of their mouth is sorry. Stop saying sorry. What are you sorry for?
I'm a culprit. I'm a culprit myself. No, on that note, Gina, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for this candid conversation. And this, as I said, that, once the microphone is off, this is going to stay with me. And you reminded that we don't really get to choose every chapter what the life hands to us, but we do choose what we make out of it. So the trauma may mark us, but the purpose which shapes us, who we become, and even stronger. And this is not just a podcast, this is a warm hug, it's a global sisterhood. And whether you're navigating a boardroom or the Supreme Court like Gina, remember your voice is not just a currency. If the world tests you, you can actually come back even stronger, rise above all the ashes, just like Gina, and listen to that inner voice and let your pain become your power. So stand tall, stay beautiful, stay humble, and stay powerful. Thank you so much for all your information, all your talk, all your help and support, and listening to all the podcasts. And I'll see you on the other side for the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to You Are a Force. Hit subscribe and join us next week for more powerful stories from women rewriting the rules. Until then, keep building, keep leading, and remember, you are a force.